Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining this session. One second, I'll be sharing my screen. Great. Yeah, hopefully you can see my screen and also able to see me. So first of all, thank you for Israel Clouds and for the whole summit itself. Thank you for hosting. And we'll be speaking here today about a kind of like a large subject, and we'll try to at least touch the surface to be able to understand what are the problems that are being introduced right now on the new world of actually working with cloud in a secure manner and having a lot of actual relationship with the whole context of data privacy today. I'll start with an introduction. We have a limited amount of time, 30 minutes, but at least we'll try to make the best of it. Okay, so security and data privacy in the cloud. Always, we need to actually take some kind of at least risk-based approach to try to handle all of the problems and issues that might occur. I'll start with a really short introduction about myself. My name is Demi Ben Ari. I'm one of the co-founders and the CTO of Panorays. The context, I'll go back. I come from the background of engineering. I started in the Israeli Air Force, actually. There I was a software engineer, a team leader, and then a senior engineer. Basically, I developed a missile defense system. On-prem, near real-time, etc., distributed systems. And then when I left the military, I started working a lot with the context of cloud providers, security, mostly doing a lot of maritime analytics. I actually started working in a company called Windward. Basically, what I did with missiles in the Israeli Air Force, I did with ships when I left the military. So it was in the context of maritime analytics. And we've actually migrated a platform that was on-prem, didn't scale up anymore, to a fully microservices architecture in AWS, working a lot with big data technologies like Apache Spark, distributed databases like Cassandra, etc. So again, I've done things and built a lot of I would say cloud-based applications. I'm also leading developer communities, one that is called Big Things, focused on big data, data science, and DevOps. We're over 6,500 people. And I'm also a GDE, a Google Developer Expert, that basically is Google certifies me that I talk a lot. So unfortunately, you don't have the ability to actually interrupt me during this session. So I am confined to time. I think we'll start with the presentation itself with asking a question. What is cybersecurity in general? And when we look in cybersecurity in a broad term, you can see a lot of funny fails that might occur, but it will be the digital footprint that we hold today in the world. Okay, so cybernetic world, and we're trying to secure ourselves and actually work in a secure manner when we're talking about different kinds of abilities in the context of cyber. Okay, so let's define security. And when we talk about security and technology, security is basically focused on the technology side of it, but not only. We need to understand that basically by understanding something about the landscape of security, we also need to take action. And all of the things that we do after we actually identify different kinds of aspects of the cybersecurity world. But not only that, we need some kind of process also to put in place, basically to be able to adhere to different kinds of methodologies that we have. So, for example, lots of policies that we might have in the world, these all adhere to different kinds of processes and frameworks that we might want to kind of understand and implement in our organizations. And all of these take in account different kinds of risk assessment methodologies. And we can see that on the links. I won't go into depth here really, but we can dive in if we'd like on a different kind of session. So eventually, it's all a matter of amount of resources that we want to invest in the whole process, and maybe even with different kinds of tooling that we kind of want to implement in our organization versus the amount of security that we can actually achieve. And this is basically the amount of at least like human resources also that we want to invest in that context, then you won't achieve 100% of security ever, even if you had the endless amount of resources. So let's define another aspect of the conversation that we're trying to actually have. What is data privacy, right? So data privacy, I think we'll start with an kind of like an experiment. Because right now we have an entity. We have maybe a company or a human being or somebody that is interacting in a cloud-based environment. And right now we kind of want to identify, at least for ourselves, what type of data we're holding and what's its criticality. So for example, like understand what is the most confidential information of our company. And after we actually understood that, we can also try to classify what we actually can lose to afford. Okay, because not everything, like maybe if it's lost, maybe we can recover from that. And this is on the context of irreplaceable. And in the context of tech, these are backups. Okay, this is like literally what backups are made for. And of course, if the data is leaked outside, what could cause the most damage to our company? And of course, what might actually impact your reputation? Because, for example, if you're a cybersecurity company and you get hacked, probably it's bad, right? Or different manners of defacement, or maybe even like exposing different things to the outer world might hurt your reputation because like a lot of confidential information got leaked. So we spoke high level, like what type of classification might be made, but let's talk about like real data assets that might be relevant to the context of the company or even the individual. Different kinds of photos, credit card details, bank account details, PII, personal identifiable information, different kinds of social media accounts, by the way, which are also like SaaS-based solutions, primary emails or different kinds of emails that you might have in your organization, or even like private ones, and IP, intellectual property of the company. Different kinds of secret files might be automatically generated and revoked and might be like there for all time. And password information, financial records, user data, customer data, all might be relevant and important. Another question to ask on the data protection laws is like, what are we regulated upon? And around the world, basically, you can see that in the link of DLA, Piper data protection laws. That it's a law firm, and you can actually like look in this link because it's really cool. You can try to understand at least the regulatory landscape of all of the data privacy rules around the world. And you might even have like entities that work in multiple areas of the world also having to adhere to these kind of regulations. And it's kind of tricky because right now what happens if you have a company and then maybe even a subsidiary company that works underneath that, and you kind of need to classify that of what type of relationships you have between the entities of passing information between them. It's kind of interesting, and it's really, really hard to actually implement that. So I would ask, like, what type of questions we might ask in the context of handling data, right? Like in our company, who's holding the data? Like what entity, what type of tool maybe, or some person, human being? How much data is held, which is also important, and in the context of who is actually processing the data, because maybe you're receiving data, doing something on that, some kind of transformation, even not saving all of the data and saving a subset out of it. And of course, who has access to the data? It's not like all of the company has access to all of the information of the company. And of course, how long the data is retained, because sometimes like any policy, any certification that you might do in the context of data privacy, you're always asked, how long are you keeping the data and what purpose for? And in general, you need to kind of understand the real relevance and the context of all of these like questions asked to try to classify what type of action is needed to be done in the context of security of keeping that data safe and secure. Going forward, we've kind of defined the context of security, and again, of course, in a high level, and also defined the context of data privacy. but we're talking on cloud. What is cloud? Okay, so the most straightforward thing when thinking about cloud and when talking about cloud, this is like infrastructure, right? We're speaking about Google Cloud, their cool data centers. You can see that here with all the like the colorful pipes. AWS, Azure, talking a lot about Kubernetes, which is one of the most common orchestration frameworks of Docker containers and containers in general. Cool, right? Like, but is this the only thing? Okay, let's go forward, because like we spoke about the context of enterprise, right? Our company. But today, companies, any company from the smallest one to the largest one, are using tons of services, okay? And tons of SaaS services, software as a service applications, from ServiceNow, Salesforce, Workday, Adobe, NetSuite, all sorts of things that we're using on the day-to-day to actually do our job, okay? So these things are also considered cloud, because think of it that this is held by a different entity, okay? A third party that actually holds our data. They help us much, because right now they're like automating all of our tools and everything, and we're able to access from anywhere, any place in the world, etc. But these things are also cloud-based solutions, right? But let's like step forward. In general, what is the cloud in the context of actually automating the DevOps operations part of it? Okay, so think of it that all of the tooling that we're using today, all of the interconnected applications to our infrastructure, they're also cloud-based solutions, right? And think of all of the underlying layers that I've described right now of SaaS, PaaS, IaaS. All of these tools are actually holding our information, from monitoring tools to logging tooling, different kinds of, like tracing tools to our production environment. They're all processing information. Okay, so basically it boils down to, what if I told you that there is no cloud and it's just somebody else's computer? Because basically this is what is happening. Okay, we're not holding our own data centers, but somebody is holding a computer eventually. Some sort of server running somewhere, okay, even if it's like functions as a service, then basically somebody is running the servers underneath them, okay? So you need to understand that when we're talking about cloud. It's kind of an obscure manner when you're talking to CISOs, but it is something substantial when everything that we're doing in the company right now is literally like communicating with the cloud-based solutions, and not only infrastructure like we know on the context of, like all of the largest cloud providers. So basically like third party who, okay, because we spoke about a lot of third party entities. And you might note that when we're talking about breaches, it's not only security breaches, it's data breaches. And a breach in your small supplier that holds like maybe even like marketing automation tools can hurt you really, really bad, okay? And think of it that data leakage there does not even mean that you need to be compromised to actually be hurt, because once your third party gets breached, your cloud-based solution gets breached, your data might be leaked outside, and nothing happened to you as your like internal perimeter, but your data was leaked. So think of it that our context right now, it kind of expanded to all of the third-party application, cloud-based applications that we're using, and mostly because the increase of usage today, because it is easier and it's much better to actually use that in cloud-based apps. Everybody are like working from home in the context of COVID also. And third parties are the most like common vector of attackers today, because it's much easier to hack them than hack a larger company that has a lot of security controls in place. And of course, combining that with lots of data regulations from GDPR, NYDFS, NY Shield Act, the CCPA, and many, many more, even in local areas, actually make us do some work in the context of cybersecurity. So moving forward, okay, we've spoke about data, right? And we spoke about security, and we spoke about the landscape of where everything is held. But an attacker would actually do some kind of reconnaissance to try to understand the attack surface of any organization, and by that, actually like try to compromise that. So as part of the attack surface, we'll have different kinds of technology aspects, but not only that, we'll have the affiliation to different kinds of cloud solutions that are in place. So let's talk about like at least what we're trying to organize and what we're trying to recon upon, okay? So we have the organizational things, the easier domains, subdomains, IP addresses, endpoints, technology things, and even like customer information that is held on the context of technology. And we have the other end, different kinds of secret files, Bitcoin wallets, primary emails, and again, like a lot of PII, which is in the context of human. Cool. But we have all of the things that are like kind of in the middle. Okay. The intellectual property of the company, secret files that are common to the organization, password information, financial records, how the company is doing, bank account details, credit card details, photos, and account information, etc. So all of these digital presence issues might be things that attackers would like to actually search to try to identify what means, or like at least like how they will be able to actually compromise the information of the company. And again, of course, always distributed around the globe, because even when you're holding any cloud-based solution, probably you'll be able to actually put that in different kinds of data centers. And once you have that, all of your data is globally distributed. What happens if you have some kind of CDN maybe, okay, that gives information to all around the world? So you would have the hotspot that actually like processes all of the data. Okay, it can be log data, and it can be PII data. And then you need to maybe think about like encryption. So you have lots of things to take into account once you get that in a globally distributed manner. So when we spoke right now about like entities, right? People, human beings, it always matters when you talk about authentication, because right now somebody needs to understand that it's Demi. Okay, I am working with the specific solution, product, etc. I'm giving away the data. And once I've authenticated myself and it's really Demi, okay, and it's not somebody that is imposing to be Demi, I need to get the specific authorization, okay, because I can't access all of the information. I might not even need to, and need to know basis is a really, really important thing, important feature of security. So in that context, when I'm giving like my authentication information, I should be getting authorization to specific things and passing away that authorization when I ask different kinds of questions to different entities. And when we talk about like microservices and all of the cool buzzwords in the engineering world, it should be taken in account. But again, let's try to understand. I am an entity right now. I'm Demi again. So I want to do things in specific manners. I want to do that privately, right? So let's define privacy. Privacy is basically knowing to answer the question, what are you doing? Or like at least what am I doing? So if I'm doing things encrypted, nobody will be able to actually know what I am doing in the matter of behavior. So this is one aspect. The anonymity part of it should be who is doing what, okay? So specifically to be able to identify Demi and me doing something that might be malicious as an attacker, so I can identify the malicious intent and do something with that and prefer some kind of action. So these aspects are important. Like for example, let's take the privacy, encryption in transit. So any entity in the World Wide Web won't be able to know how am I interacting with the platform. Cool. But anonymity might be something that I will be using, maybe like some kind of VPN connection, and I will be hiding my specific identity to protect myself from different kind of aspects. But what's pseudo-anonymity? Pseudo-anonymity is the context of knowing that some entity is doing an action, but I really do not know who is that entity. And a cross-correlation attack by different kinds of adversaries can actually like pinpoint who is the entity that is doing something. Because right now I might have hidden myself, Demi, and they know that somebody is doing something, but do not know who that is. And maybe if I expose different kinds of data features on my behavior, somebody will be able to actually cross-reference that and identify me as Demi. Okay, so let's talk about some tools about reconnaissance, and I really like fly through that. Different kinds of open source intelligence tools like Shodan that expose different infrastructure pieces to the world and try to understand at least like what is that piece doing. Different kinds of web cameras that are open to the world. You will be amazed how many things you can find on Shodan. For example, like casino cameras that are open to the world. Different kinds of information about IP addresses, etc. Like census, and you can try to identify different information about hosts and websites, etc. Different kinds of gathering tools, let's say Maltigo. And Maltigo can have different kinds of plugins to a lot of enrichment of open source intelligence that attackers or even like good white hat hackers can have access to and try to identify the attack surface of any organization in the context of human infrastructure, etc. And of course, like threat intelligence tools, I would call them, data leakage parts of Have I Been Pwned, and many others that actually provide this kind of information. So I see cyber risks, okay, cyber risks everywhere. And basically, it's a classification of the attack surface of any organization. We spoke about the assets, right? Assets are things that I want to protect: identities, content, intellectual property of the company, files, access rights, privacy. But we are trying to kind of like defend them with different kinds of tools that we might want to put in place. For example, encryption, multi-factor authentication, firewalls, web application firewalls, encryption, transit and at rest, different kinds of VPN connection, and maybe like hidden services like Tor. And these are all knobs, okay? But what are you trying to protect from? Different kinds of activities, okay? Phishing, spyware, mass surveillance, adware, different kinds of exploit kits. But the biggest question also is like, who are we trying to protect from? And there are all of the cool, sexy things, spies, nation states, hackers, cyber criminals, etc. But we can be really the stupidest things of an ex-employee, an ex-partner of yours, 15-year-old that can automate Kali Linux and actually like brute force a lot of abilities. And this is like the threat landscape that we have from the outside. And risks are a derivative out of all of these features, like vulnerabilities multiplied with threats and the consequences that what happens if this type of data is actually leaked to the outer world. Okay, so cybersecurity and privacy frameworks, because right now we spoke about all of the problems and all of the things that we might need to fear from, right? So I will mention the free frameworks because there are a lot of certifications that you need to pay money for and an auditor to actually come and maybe do some kind of process with you. But NIST, for example, the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the US, has a framework called NIST CSF, Cybersecurity Framework, that is free, and you can actually implement that in your organization. It takes into account a lot of the context of the process that we spoke about in the beginning and try to implement some kind of skeleton that you might even take some parts of it to try to implement a framework that is ripe enough to actually have a really like good cyber posture. But also NIST privacy frameworks that is a derivative and try to understand the data mapping of a company. Also, I'm part of the CSA of multiple like design groups and working groups. So in that context, they have a really great framework to evaluate different kinds of SaaS and cloud solutions, which is called security guidance of CSA. Of critical areas of focused on cloud computing, and you can actually address the links. And you have the tools in which you can actually use, which are the CCM, the Cloud Controls Matrix, that kind of like classifies all of the things that you can actually, like all of the security controls that you can put in place, and the CAIQ, what's called the CAKE, the Consensus Assessment Initiative Questionnaire. It's a literal questionnaire that you can, first of all, like answer on yourself to try to understand your cloud security maturity. And you can send that to your aggregate cloud solutions, and maybe they have self-attestations of the cake to provide you the assurance of their maturity also in the context of security, which is cool. Let's take an example, okay? A derivative of the NIST CSF framework comes from threats coming to the company and all of the abilities to actually prevent these kind of threats. But let's take into account that everybody are breachable and a breach had occurred. Detecting when there is a malicious intender in the perimeter, and if something bad happened, to also recover from that. And we have different tools that actually implement that. I won't go into depth because of shortage of time. But security threat model, okay? And how do you actually like do that? So let's define kind of like what's threat modeling, because we've identified all of the things that might impose threat to the company, but let's take it a bit more practical, a bit. It's basically a structured security basis analysis, and we're trying to understand at least uh, our landscape, mapping the data, mapping all of our digital assets to the world, and actually creating some kind of architecture and some kind of framework or process to maybe secure all of these like steps on the way. Again, we spoke about the frameworks, and we need a framework also to understand the threats. Framework, it's not something too complicated. It can be a set of meetings on a certain cadence, etc. But we need to implement something that everybody in the company or everybody involved kind of adhere to. And of course, review all of the design elements. Design elements can be software pieces. They can be parts of the process of actually moving information from an entity to an entity. And also it can be a direct element of business, which we kind of have a business partnership with some kind of entity, and we have a process of actually disclosing data. And of course, once we actually found all of the threats and the problems, we need to actually prioritize them, because we can't access all. Okay, it's a matter of resources, like we spoke in the beginning, and you need to prioritize and mitigate all of the risks. So the core questions of asking in threat modeling, and when implementing any type of solution, it can be a cloud-based solution of IaaS, of PaaS, of SaaS, we need to ask these kind of questions. Right now, what are we trying to build? Okay, literally what piece of software or what piece of connectivity we're trying to achieve inside. Then let's ask what can go wrong, because Murphy's Law, what can go wrong will go wrong. And after we actually understood that, we need to prioritize and try to understand what are we doing about it. A really good decision might be not to do anything, okay? And it's basically accepting the risk and trying to understand that maybe we can invest a lot of, like endless amount of resources, at least in fixing something, and we won't achieve really good security. So maybe it's not worth it of actually like doing something, and we'll buy insurance. I'm not saying it's a good solution for everything, but you might actually go there. And of course, after we did some kind of action, we actually want to measure ourselves and to ask, did we do a good job? Of, even if I chose not to do something, maybe this is the most like the largest threat on our company, because we're getting hit 15 times a day. Okay, so to summarize things, think of it that in the context, you need to map and classify your data, which is really, really important. A lot of work is being done in this area, in this world, because again, like we spoke 20 years ago, I would say that we're holding closely all of the information in our own data center. Everything is okay. Nobody can hack us. Let's pretend that this lie is correct. Right now, I'm using services practically for anything and cloud-based solutions for anything. So I need to understand at least what amount of data, what type of data I'm giving to the SaaS solution, and even like what type of processing, how much time it actually retains the data after it gets that. So these are the things that I need to understand, at least to try to tell the board as the CISO, okay, how do I need to protect that, and what do I need to protect? Doing threat modeling is great, but it's not enough. You need to create a process around it, because it's not a one-off. Developers, like literal people that implement the solutions, should threat model, but not only. Okay, not only security, because right now, if I will be the bad guy in the context of, I'm the security person, I will be the gatekeeper, it won't be a corporation, and we won't be able to do a good job. Like any teamwork, everybody should get involved and should do something about things that are relevant to them. You need to prioritize your data, your business value, and actually understand what you protect. Make the solutions also like quick and lightweight, okay, because you will need to change that always. Everything is over changing. And of course, make it agile. Cool word to say. And think of it that in the context of security, it's not a one-off, okay? It's not a one-off solution that I paid X amount of money and achieved security. That's it. I can go right now to the beach. It's you need to do that periodically. It's a process, okay? And of course, always challenge yourself, and challenge your software, your solutions, what you're trying to achieve, and challenge your cloud infrastructure. When I'm saying cloud infrastructure, it's not only the physical infrastructure, it might be any SaaS solutions that you're implementing, and you need to keep track on the context of the data and how it's being passed. Okay, After talking really fast for 30 minutes, I think your faces are probably like that. It's a like this whole context of data privacy and cloud security is so large. Okay, so we can go on lots of areas and try to understand at least like what type of solutions we could put in place to implement and achieve a certain amount of maturity of security. And it's really important to try to understand and classify all of the problems before we start doing shopping for tools. And this is the most like strong outcome that I want to give you out of this like talk. And I will like summarize that in a couple of sentences. Think of it that you need to classify all of the information that you need to process, and then afterward try to understand how it's being passed through all over the process, the business process that you have in your company. Then try to understand and classify which cloud tools you're using, if it's infrastructure as PaaS, SaaS, or different kinds of abilities. Try to understand at least how the data flows there, and then try to ask the questions as the security person or as the person that is trying to secure himself, at least. Like, it can be somebody from engineering. What are the things that are most important to our company? And then we've kind of created a framework of evaluating our own security maturity. And once we've done that, we can maybe like get that to the context of regulations and different kinds of standard frameworks that are out there in the world. And of course, then we will need to create the compensating controls, the compensating security controls that we want to install and implement in our own process to be as secure as possible. And again, we won't achieve 100% ever. And if you have any other questions, really feel free to shoot me an email at demi@panorays.com, as you see on the screen. Any social media matter, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, etc. I would really glad to help you out, and really thank you very much for Israel Clouds to host this thing. And I hope my English wasn't a problem, actually. Thank you very much, and have a great day.